Elijah, a 36-year-old white mechanic in a small town tucked deep within Arkansas, was used to fixing broken things bent. Axles, jammed transmissions, rusted-out mufflers. He'd even once welded together a lawnmower engine for a high school science fair. But on that particular Tuesday morning, as the thick summer heat settled into the tin roof of his shop, something rolled into his life that didn't belong to any make or model. A dusty minivan creaked to a halt outside, and a white single mother stepped out, her face drawn, tired, but determined. Beside her in the back was a little girl in a rattling pink wheelchair. The girl's name was Ava, 7 years old, born with cerebral palsy. Her legs twisted slightly inward, and her eyes impossibly blue. The wheelchair looked barely functional. Its motor sputtered, the wheels creaked like rusty grocery cart wheels, and a section of the backrest was held together with duct tape. The moment Elijah saw it, he stopped wiping grease from his palms and stepped forward, curiosity and concern overtaking habit. Claire, the mother, offered a quiet, pleading smile. "Nobody around here will fix it," she said. "They either want too much money or they just say no." Elijah crouched down, looking the machine over like he would a busted tractor. He didn't flinch at the missing bolts, the frayed wires, or the warped frame. "How long's it been like this?" he asked, squinting, beneath the sunlight. "Months," Claire replied softly, "but now it barely moves." He looked up at her, then at the child, whose fingers clutched the armrest like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away. Elijah could have said no. He could have pointed her to a dealer in Little Rock or told her he didn't specialize in medical equipment. Instead, he muttered, "I can try." That night, long after the other bays in the garage had gone dark, Elijah stayed behind. The radio played old country tunes in the corner. His coffee was cold by the time midnight struck, but he never stopped working. He placed the wheelchair on a jack, peeled apart the electronics carefully, and laid every piece on a stained workbench. Most of the internal wiring had corroded. The battery pack was nearly dead. He scavenged parts from an old golf cart motor he had lying around. He welded the broken frame and repainted the arms to match the pink paint. He didn't know why, but something about this job mattered more. The second night, Elijah didn't even go home. He laid out his sleeping bag behind the tool wall and got a few hours of rest before sunrise. By morning, he was back at it. Claire had promised to return by noon, and by 11, he had the chair reassembled. He tested the controls, adjusted the height settings, even added a new safety harness he found in a catalog months ago but never used. When Claire arrived, the look on her face made all the fatigue worth it. Ava was lifted gently into the seat. The motor whirred smoothly. The wheels glided over gravel, and Ava's tiny laugh filled the dusty garage. Claire's eyes welled up with tears. I didn't think it could be fixed," she whispered, hugging him without warning. Elijah, caught off guard, patted her back with awkward kindness. "Just metal and wires," he muttered. But before they could roll away, Ava looked up at him, her voice small but steady. "Now I can go where?" "Daddy went." Elijah blinked, unsure he'd heard her right. Claire froze, her smile faltering. For a moment no one spoke. The air grew thick again, not from heat, but something heavier. Elijah looked between them and realized this job wasn't just about mobility. Something deeper had been shaken loose. Later that afternoon, Elijah couldn't stop thinking about Ava's words. He paced around the shop, replaying her voice in his head. "Now I can go where Daddy went." It wasn't just a child's imagination. It had weight to it, grief, longing, maybe even guilt. That night, he pulled out an old notebook where he sometimes wrote down things he couldn't say aloud. He scribbled 3 words: "Fix more than metal." Somehow, this little girl had cracked open a place inside him that had stayed shut since his brother's funeral years ago. It wasn't lost on him how things like this, moments that shook you, rarely came twice. The next day, Claire returned with a thermos of hot coffee and a brown paper bag of fresh biscuits. Elijah accepted them with a nod, still feeling awkward in the presence of emotion. Ava rolled in with ease, maneuvering through the shop like a pilot testing a new aircraft. "She's never been this confident," Claire said softly. "She wouldn't even speak to other people before." Elijah watched Ava navigate between toolboxes and tires. "She's got a pilot's hands," he said. Ava smiled up at him. "Like Daddy," she whispered. Claire flinched. Elijah noticed but said nothing. He finally asked gently, "Where's her dad?" Claire hesitated. "Gone," she said. "Last year, drowned, Lake Conway." She bit her lip, as if holding back something more. Elijah nodded solemnly. Ava kept spinning quietly, her fingers gripping the joystick like it was connected to memory itself. "She was there," Claire finally admitted. "In the chair. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. I found them both on the dock." Elijah's throat tightened. The idea of a child trapped, watching something unexplainable he couldn't imagine. Claire's voice broke. "She hasn't talked about it, not once, until yesterday." Elijah looked back at Ava, who now sat still by the garage door, watching dust dance in the light. "Maybe this chair ain't just a chair," he said softly. "Maybe it's her voice." Claire wiped a tear from her cheek. "You did something I couldn't. You helped her speak." Elijah had no answer. He just turned and walked back into the garage, the weight of it all settling like oil on skin. That night, he closed early and sat outside looking at the stars, wondering what it meant to fix things no one could see. The following morning, as Elijah swept the floor, he heard the familiar hum of Ava's motorized wheels. She rolled up to him with surprising control and handed him something, a drawing crayon on paper. It was a sketch of a lake, a dock, and a tall man standing beside a girl in a wheelchair. Above it, written in messy, colorful letters, "Goodbye, Daddy." Elijah swallowed hard. Claire came in moments later, saw the picture and froze. "She drew that this morning," she said in a whisper. "She's never drawn him before, not once." Elijah crouched beside Ava. "You want to go there?" he asked. Ava nodded. Claire's face was a storm of emotions, fear, love, grief, but eventually she said yes. That evening, Elijah loaded the chair into his pickup. Claire and Ava sat up front, the little girl holding her picture tightly. The sun dipped low behind the trees as they reached Lake Conway. It was quiet, just as Ava remembered. The dock stretched out into the still water, weathered and worn. Elijah lowered the ramp and Ava rolled herself forward, her mother a few steps behind. At the edge of the dock, Ava stopped. Then, softly, she said, "Goodbye, Daddy." Claire gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. She dropped to her knees, sobbing. Ava turned around, her face calm, like something heavy had finally lifted. Elijah stood a few feet back, hands in his pockets, watching the scene with silent reverence. The moment felt sacred. It wasn't his loss, but somehow he'd become part of the healing. Claire looked at him through tears. "Thank you." She choked out. "You didn't just fix her chair, you helped her let go." Elijah didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Sometimes the most important things in life didn't need words. Driving home that night, Ava slept in the back seat, her head resting peacefully. Claire sat quietly beside Elijah, her hand occasionally brushing his as if seeking comfort in his presence. "You've changed her life," she said. Elijah shook his head. "She did that. I just gave her wheels." Claire smiled softly. But deep down, Elijah knew this would stay with him forever. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear oil-stained overalls and fix broken things. This time, it wasn't metal or wires. It was something far more fragile. And somehow, he'd managed not just to repair, but to restore. Elijah stood still as Claire clutched her chest like the wind had been knocked from her. Her breath hitched, eyes locked on her daughter as Ava's words echoed in the mechanic's garage. The sound of "Daddy" wasn't just a word, it was a wound ripped open. Elijah didn't know the full story, but he didn't need to. The silence in the room said enough. Claire looked at Ava like she was seeing a ghost speak. Elijah crouched beside the girl again. "Where did Daddy go, sweetheart?" His voice was quiet, kind. Ava didn't blink. "To the lake," she said. Claire staggered slightly, gripping the workbench behind her. "The one with the quiet trees," Ava added softly, almost like a whisper wrapped in a memory. Elijah's brow furrowed. That phrase sounded rehearsed, like something Ava had repeated in her mind over and over. Claire covered her mouth with both hands as her knees buckled. Elijah reached to steady her. Her lips trembled. She hasn't talked about that place, not once." The garage buzzed faintly with the sound of cooling metal and an old country song humming from a dusty radio. Elijah glanced from mother to daughter. Ava's eyes weren't distant. They were sharp, alert, but calm. "That was the day," Claire whispered. "The day her father—" She couldn't finish. Elijah understood. He stood slowly, eyes warm. "Want me to take you—" "There, Ava?" he asked gently. Ava nodded. Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're sure?" Elijah asked again, kneeling. Ava looked straight at him. "Yes." That evening, the Arkansas sky was dipped in gold as Elijah's pickup rolled through the woods. Ava sat beside him, buckled in, her repaired wheelchair folded in the truck bed. Claire followed in her own car, hands shaking on the wheel. The dirt road narrowed, winding through pines that whispered in the breeze. Elijah didn't speak much. He knew some journeys were better served with silence. Ava stared out. The window, expression unreadable. The air between them held grief, history, and something else, release. They arrived at the edge of the lake just before sunset. It was quiet, still. A veil of pink sky reflected across the smooth water. Claire parked behind Elijah and got out, slowly, hesitating near the trees. Elijah unfolded the wheelchair, locking it in place, then lifted Ava gently from the seat and placed her back in. He checked the straps, the wires, the little control pad. "All yours," he whispered, smiling. Ava pressed forward on the joystick, and the chair glided toward the dock. Claire stayed near the path, arms crossed tightly. Elijah stood beside her, both watching Ava's wheels roll effortlessly down the wooden pier. For a moment, the creaking of planks under her chair was the only sound. Then Ava stopped halfway. Down. The lake shimmered before her. A single bird flew low over the water. She leaned forward, took a breath, and whispered, "Goodbye, Daddy." Claire choked back a sob. The moment was small, quiet, but it cracked something enormous. Claire dropped to her knees in the dirt, trembling, tears pouring freely. It wasn't just Ava saying goodbye, it was her. For over a year she'd carried the weight of guilt, unable to help, unable to save, unable to speak. That lake had become a chamber of memory. And somehow, through a mechanic's hands and a child's courage, the key had turned. Elijah didn't interrupt. He watched from a respectful distance, his calloused hands shoved in his pockets, face unreadable. Ava turned her chair slowly, and for the first time in a year, she smiled. Not a wide grin, just a gentle, real one, soft and forgiving. Claire looked up and saw it, her sobs now replaced by stunned stillness. Elijah walked to the dock and extended a hand. Ava reached out and held his finger. "Thank you," she whispered. Elijah crouched beside her and smiled back. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Claire approached slowly, eyes red, and placed her hand on Elijah's shoulder. "I don't know what you did, but you brought her back." The drive home was quiet. Ava fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window, the repaired chair folded neatly again. Claire sat beside her, still processing the weight of what had just happened. Elijah focused on the road, the warmth of the moment sinking deep into his bones. It wasn't about tools or wires. It was about care. And for once, in his life full of fixing engines, he had fixed something. Human. Something delicate, something no one else had bothered to understand. The next morning, the small town buzzed with whispers. Claire had posted a photo on social media, Ava smiling at the lake, her wheelchair perfectly aligned. The caption, who read, "He didn't just fix her chair, he gave her voice back." By noon, the phone at Elijah's garage wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, parents, therapists, even wheelchair manufacturers started calling. But Elijah didn't care about interviews. He kept doing what he'd always done, fixing things in silence, one bolt at a time. That afternoon, Claire and Ava returned to the garage. This time, Ava moved her chair by herself, zipping carefully over the oil-stained floor like it was home. Elijah looked up from under a truck and smiled. Claire had brought coffee. "I owe you something stronger," she joked. Elijah chuckled, wiping grease from his hands. "I'll take a smile over whiskey any day." Ava turned toward him, extended her hand, and offered a small, crumpled drawing. "It's us," she said shyly. The paper showed a stick-figure version of Elijah beside a pink wheelchair and a lake. Claire was in the corner, hands over her mouth. Elijah blinked. He hadn't cried in years, but something inside him shook. He framed the drawing that night and placed it above his workbench next to his old army photo. He looked up at it often when the days got hard. That crooked smile, those colored lines, they reminded him why he did this. Not for money, not for praise, but for healing. As weeks passed, Elijah's garage became something more than a place for tune-ups and tire changes. People started bringing more than cars, they brought hope. A father with a broken stroller, a boy with a functioning prosthetic leg, a veteran with a wheelchair no VA clinic would fix. Elijah worked on them all, never charging a dime for mobility repairs. "Not charity," he'd say, "just human." Claire started, volunteering, answering calls, and helping manage requests. Ava, now more talkative than ever, became the shop's honorary assistant. One Saturday, the mayor dropped by unannounced with a local news crew. Elijah looked confused as cameras rolled in. Claire nudged him to smile. The mayor gave a short speech, then unveiled a plaque. Elijah Cole Community Service Award for restoring more than machines. Elijah stood awkwardly in front of the crowd, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just fix stuff," he mumbled. But Ava shouted from the front, "You fix hearts too." The crowd laughed and applauded. Elijah's ears turned red. Later that evening, Elijah sat on the shop's back steps, sipping sweet tea as the sun dipped low again. Claire joined him, too, cups in hand. "You okay?" she asked. Elijah shrugged. "Still figuring out how to be a hero, I guess." Claire smiled. "You're not a hero, Elijah." He raised an eyebrow. "Your family," she added softly. They sat in silence, watching Ava race her repaired chair in wide circles behind the garage, free, wild, and fearless. A girl reborn, a mother renewed, and a mechanic who unknowingly gave them both their lives back. Elijah never forgot that week. Not the lake, not the drawing, not the words Ava said when she first wheeled down the pier. Sometimes he'd catch himself watching the door, wondering who would walk in next, what broken thing needed fixing. And every time, without fail, he'd whisper the same thing under his breath as he rolled up his sleeves and reached for his tools. "Let's try." Because sometimes trying was everything. And sometimes one small try was enough to change someone's entire world forever.